Hey everybody, I'm Jody Vance.
And I'm George-affleck.
And it's time for...
a place where we never poo-poo anything unspun.
Are we starting with poo jokes?
a little potty humor. A little down below. The number one to the number two.
This is where we've gotten to, George. UnSpun Podcast 2021, where our lead story is a toilet. A very expensive toilet.
Yeah. $640,000? $645,000 plus, apparently. It's a bit unknown at this point. Park board, I guess, is in charge of this.
Sorry, triggered me there. Sorry. We're going to spend, $645,000 on a toilet in the same city where there are people living in war zone conditions in a park down the way.
It's funny because I haven't actually seen a story where they've gone to Strathcona, that's what you're referring to, and asked the neighbors what they think of it. I've seen some people, the taxpayer people and all that stuff. Oh, this is an outrage. The cost is an outrage. Haven't heard really from Strathcona saying this is an outrage because, hey, hello, over here, park board. And I actually haven't heard from the downtown east side or the homeless advocates saying this is a good or bad thing, which is interesting because as a Yaletown resident, this location is in the heart of sort of the park area of Yaletown on the water. It's a toilet that will be used by them, certainly 24/7 and available to them, of course, as is the one. There's a toilet up in Emery Barnes Park, not quite as fancy, but it's there as well. And it's a fancy self-washing toilet. There's one up on Davie Street too. But this one is a Portland Loo, it's called, which cost, they say, retail, if that's a thing, $100,000 US, I think. So Canadian, what's that? That's $600,000.
See, and there's so much I want to ask you about within what you just stated. Because I don't know the inner workings. I don't understand this, but you just said there's another loo. Because you know what the people, the advocates on the downtown east side are saying? We need more public facilities. We need more toilets for people who have no homes. They need to go to the bathroom and they need to do so regularly. This should not be a this just in situation, and porta potties are not the answer. Nobody likes a porta potty, and nobody should be forced into using one regularly. They're just not kept to a safe degree. Anyway, just don't even get me started. Even thinking about a porta potty makes me want to throw up. But I want to say,
you mean a construction site?
Yeah, like a plastic tube. Like they have them down at
outhouse.
An outhouse. Like Spanish Banks is a great example. Down by the dog park there have been 3 porta potties there for years and years, and there's no $640,000 toilet there. Maybe that'll be coming soon. I'll have to check with our park board contacts. But when you say there's a toilet on Davie Street, and there's another one at a park up the road, and there are other parks that we can point to where there are washroom facilities. There has to be. I mean, you need bathrooms, you need toilets. So why this one? Why so expensive? Why the exorbitant amount of money being spent on this? Do we really need a tank of a bathroom is, I guess, my question.
Yes. Is a short answer. Do we have to pay that much for it? I don't know. I mean, the challenge, of course, is, and I think Daily Hive did a good Kenneth Chan. Kenneth.
Yeah.
Kenneth Chan. Yeah. He wrote a column on this, and they talked a bit about, laid out sort of the math a little bit on it, but there's the cost, the overhead of the installation and all that stuff, and that's kind of where the number comes from. But there's their operating costs, which afterwards. So there's manpower that is required to clean a toilet. There's how do you clean it? There's destruction of toilets. All of that costs money on an ongoing basis. By spending a lot of money at the top, at the beginning, the hard costs, in this situation, the argument, which hasn't been made very well by anybody at this point, would be that the ongoing costs would be minimal because of the way they are built, and they are Portland Loo has created a toilet that you can't graffiti on, you can't dismantle. If you see the toilet, it's basically it looks like a prison toilet. It's a piece of metal that it's built so that's kind of indestructible, and based on the amount of use it might get and abuse it might get, not only from all sorts of people, hooligans, as former Mayor Gregor Robertson used to call them. People who just like to destroy things when they're drunk or whatever. So this toilet is meant to be indestructible. So that has a cost, but is this too much? I don't know, but it's such a challenge because you're sort of like, people want more toilets. They do.
Yeah.
Everybody wants. They argue more toilets, more garbage cans. But when the garbage can and toilet costs so much money, I don't want to pay that.
But
when is it?
But George, seriously, like if somebody was saying we're going to build 5 toilets and it will cost $600,000, people would be like, "Wow, that's an expensive toilet, but let's do it." One, we can't afford maybe we can. Maybe George, can we afford such things in Vancouver? Are we allowed to have these nice things?
Well, we can move, if you'd like to, talk a bit about the budget.
Yes, please.
Because we have the report that came out yesterday, the annual report of last year's finances, and it turns out we weren't in such dire straits as the mayor said we were. We were not bankrupt, as it turns out. We've got some surplus there, a lot of surplus.
A lot, George. My head blew off when we got this. Yeah. When we got this release, my head blew off because it was just under a year ago, where we were being faced with our elected official, our leader in Vancouver, telling us not only are we bankrupt, but we might not be able to afford ambulance and police services in a pandemic. This to me is like, why did he do that? Why did he make us all panic in the city? And how does he not know that there's a upwards of $200 million surplus from last year? How does he not know that?
Well, he would have known it because they would have given the council in camera an update, way back. So they would have known this was coming. What they are doing now is they would be working through the process of what do you do with all that money, and quite often, because they spend it. Often they'll spend the surplus on, in the case of, I think the last year I was there, Andrew Reimer put a motion forward to put all that money into daycare. There's always a goal to spend any kind of surplus that might be there and to leave.
Right, because then you need your budget to be bigger next year. And if you have a massive surplus, then the budget shrinks, not grows. Like, that's classic.
Yeah, well, that's a governmental thing for sure. But there is debt that we could pay off, I suppose.
I know. So I just want to say that my neighbor's fixing something in the yard. So if you hear like a hammering, that's not me banging my head against the table. If you're just listening to this podcast, you might assume that this is me banging my head or my fist against the table. It's my neighbor actually doing yard work. Although I do want to bang my head against the wall.
Well, yeah, and if you hear a ghost voice, it's not my head spinning. I hear Steve in the office yelling at somebody. So if you can hear somebody else talking when I'm not talking, it's not me, it's Steven.
Okay. So let's go back to this. Okay. Focus us in.
Yeah. Yes. So let me just so we have that surplus, which is surprising, and it shows the either naiveness of the mayor. And my column, by the way, this week that isn't out yet for Vancouver is Awesome is based on this. Not only the surplus, where it's about the toilet, it's about money and the capital budget that was set aside at $1.3 billion in 2019 for 4 years. It was reduced in the fall because they were worried about the pandemic. As it turns out, looks like real estate and all the money that is coming in as usual. So we probably should have stayed on track, but the mayor put us into panic mode. He spun that for whatever reason, saying the city would become bankrupt. It's completely not possible, as we talked about way back then.
Yeah, but it still scared the shizzle out of me.
Totally. Yeah. And I saw a thread today. It's such spin. Take a look at his latest Twitter thread about how great of a job he's doing and how good he is at fiscal management. Anyways, my op-ed, though, I did some back of the napkin math, and it's an interesting little, so I did, this is real rough math in my column, but I kind of wanted to put things in perspective. So if we take, we have in the capital budget, in the 2019 capital budget, it has been reduced, but let's assume we're working from an approved budget that the taxpayers voted for in 2018. $540 million is set aside for housing. Now, housing 10 years ago, we spent $0 on capital, pretty much zero. I mean, zero on building, affordable housing. Now we set aside $540 million, the capital budget, twice what it was even when I started in council, 2011, so 10 years ago. So now we have $540 million that we have set aside for housing.
Yeah.
Fine. this is money that we didn't spend because the federal and provincial governments used to spend it. By the way, I don't know if anybody saw this latest. Actually, it was the Taï who did this column, but they showed a chart of the federal government's impact of federal government's funding of social housing in Canada. In 1992, they were producing or building about 1,500 units per year. And that same year, and it was Chrétien government, the Liberal government, cut the end of the housing program. And I've talked about this before.
You have,
Two things happened in the early 90s. The national federal housing program ended, and we deinstitutionalized people in this province where, Riverview and all these places. So we let people who were challenged out on the streets. And we are one generation now since then, and here we are. That's the side of it. Anyways, so $540 million downloaded. So, by the way, just so now that 1,500, sorry, I'm bouncing around here. 1,500 units, 1,500 units a year up until the early 90s. Suddenly, boop, guess where it was in 2010? It went from 1,500 units per year, zero. Pretty much zero. So if you take, that's 20 years, that was because they stopped actually tracking then, but let's assume it's going to be in 30 years of 1,500 units per year. That's 50,000
affordable units. Like the affordable. Now, in our heads, just for people that maybe didn't hear us talk about this before, George, because I've been screaming for the gentle density. I've, like you and so many people listening right now, had a rental space that was affordable and standard and unfancy and located in a place nearby where we were working or going to post-secondary or trade school or whatever. Parquet floor and crappy windows that squeak when you open them, and the standard lamp in the ceiling that you're used to, and the pink Pepto-Bismol pink toilet and bathtub, because that's how,
beige paint.
Right, beige paint everywhere, and a crappy refrigerator, but it worked. Like all of those things, like we need that kind of rental stock. I would still live in that place that I had in Kitsilano.
I'm sure somebody's in that apartment that you live in.
Totally. 2057 West 2nd Avenue, 2nd and Arbutus in Kitsilano. The building is still there. The little crappy studio.
Jody Vance Way, I think.
There you go. It's Jody Vance Way. But I'm talking about that building was likely built in,
there was a tax incentive program to build those 3-story wood structure build. I grew up in Langley. There was tons of those 3-story walk-ups, all subsidized through the federal program. There was subsidies that were provided to the private sector to incent them to invest in rebuilding rental housing. This is a national program. You got to share the pain across the country. We can't expect Vancouver to build these things on its own. I've said this since the day I was elected.
Yep.
We can't do this on
zero.
Zero. So it's gone down to zero. So they've downloaded this, and then the province has not stepped up either.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter which political party.
No.
It's not about, this is nonpartisan, as it were, because every party is guilty of not doing its job.
Why? Federally
and provincially. Because because downloading is the latest thing. Download. For God's sakes, I was on my pack, and then we downloaded to my house. If you've ever sat on a pack at a school, which is what I did before politics, the amount of stuff that's been downloaded compared to when I was a kid to packs, it's ridiculous. Eventually, and guess who pays? You know what you do? You create these fundraisers. You get parents to pay. Yeah. Oh my God! Guess who parents are? They're taxpayers.
Yeah.
Anyways,
because we were paying already. We paid our tax, hoping to have this help our community, and then we get into these unbelievable scenarios. So how do we get out of this? That, I think, is the unspun question of 2021. Well, who can pull us?
I know. This is the math. So the math I did, going back to that again, to the $540 million.
Yes.
If I take the sort of the worst case scenario of what it costs to build a unit, if you take the more expensive pieces of property, which and the buildable square foot, let's say it's $1,000, because it's easier math. It's about $1,000 a square foot. Right. Basically, that equals about 1,000 units you can build for $540 million. It's like, it just shows you, and we need a lot more than 1,000 social housing units, certainly in Vancouver, if not the region, certainly the country.
Yeah, no.
So
question.
We are, so it's insurmountable for the city to achieve this when you know that $40 million that is not going to be achieved, of course, in those 4 years that we're going to spend that money, and those units will not be built. And is it the role of the city? Imagine, and that's what my column kind of gets into, is imagine if we didn't have to spend that money on housing in the city, and we could spend that money on other things. For example, a new pool at Sunset Beach, $100 million. Wouldn't that be nice?
Yes.
What about, and so we go back to the toilet. Maybe we want Maybe we want 1,000 of those toilets for $640 million. Whatever. But we're forced into this housing game, and it has the cost to the local taxpayers is so significant. And having such a small impact. And of course, it's important. We need those units because nobody else is building them.
And nobody else is building them, George, because if you try to include such things in your plans, even on your piece of property, you want to build a laneway house, or you've got a development that you're doing and you're going to have affordable housing as part of your plan, you're still sitting on the delays and red tape, as Francis Beulah and you have put in your columns. I mean, this is a significant topic. So when are we going to see somebody pull out the scissors and cut through all of that red tape?
Yeah, and it's funny because there's a motion coming forward from Lisa Dalmanato and Sarah Kirby-Young, NPA, related to this. And I think I talked about this, there's got to be a division of simple permits, how can we separate these things and get them out of the system and speed them up, whether it be like a Nexus system, I don't know. Anyway, so they put a motion forward coming to council next week, I guess it is, next week, that says that asking staff to prioritize the simple ones, the ones like the bathroom renovations, the office renovations, the backlog is significant, and they keep getting more piled on top of the pile. And so the pile is up here, they're pulling out from the bottom, and so the pile gets higher, but the bottom, it's like endless. And so if you're at the top of the pile or the bottom of the pile, depending on where they're grabbing the things from, if you're at the end of the line, you got a long wait. So their motion basically says you got to get this done by September. We need approval within the next 30 days. This motion has to pass, first of all, which it probably won't. We'll see. You never know. This council, God knows. And then their goal is it has to be enacted and operational within 30 days of passing and completed all these backlog by September, I think is the request. We'll see what happens next week, but that's a good move. And I think if you can separate out the complicated stuff, the big builds, say, okay, that CAC negotiation, that staff time, the Broadway plan, the City of Vancouver plan, that's happening over there. But we need to get this stuff done.
Yeah.
Francis Beulah's column, I think, really put a fire under the mayor and the council to say, oh my God, this is terrible.
Journalism matters.
Journalism matters.
Journalism matters.
We've been hearing this for years.
Yeah.
So.
Well, you know what? And George, I hate to take us back to a topic we were discussing when we first launched this podcast, 116 episodes ago, but it's along the same lines of, why can't I get a hot dog at the park? I couldn't get a hot dog at the park because the park at Carnarvon, or the permit for the hot dog stand, the concession stand in Carnarvon Park, is the same permit as the Celebration of Light. That's broken. Like the fact that we have that the 17-story building is in the same pile as somebody's laneway house that they're midway through, plans and building and that they're going to be stuck in this bottleneck. They're in the Suez Canal with the ever given tanker turned sideways and grounded. Like this is really, the canal analogy really feels appropriate for the city of Vancouver, where other jurisdictions, and this is what really gets me, George, is jurisdictions around the city of Vancouver are managing to get this stuff done in ways.
It's funny. I'll tell you why. Maybe there's another report coming to council next week on the software that the city uses, which is we brought in when I was there. It's a new system. Doesn't matter what it's called. It's software, whatever.
Okay. Yeah.
It's their CRM, their system that, everything is supposed to be built on and make everything digital. I think at this point they're past I think they're pushing $30 million on the cost of this software, and it's still not 100% implemented. The entire point of this software was to systemize permit applications. So you just go on, boop, 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 boop. Blah,
yeah, check mark.
Why is that not possible? It's kind of like this pandemic, COVID lineup phone call thing. And this, why is this not?
Right.
Why do I have to call for?
We'll get into the vaccine rollout in a second. Don't take me there quite yet.
By the way, but you're right, though. There are not only in the region, but Denmark is a leader in the world on technology and digital applications and digital government. There are lots of places to look, and it feels like sometimes not only Vancouver, so many governments work in a vacuum that we have to do it our way. Meanwhile, there's an off-the-shelf product that they probably could go, or, it's interesting today because I don't know if you heard the federal government announced this whole thing about, intelligence and software and companies in Canada being more strict about who owns what companies, and especially software companies, which is probably going to slow down things even further. Because if you're a government, you're not going to be able to buy software from another government or another country.
Can we just talk about Huawei then? Like, can the Canadian government come out one way or the other as to whether China, who is literally holding Canadians hostage for the, 800th day and putting them on trial, but we're in negotiations for allowing them to put in and install our 5G network? Like, that Canadian government is on one hand saying, well, we need to be more careful about these things. And on the other hand, not coming out and saying, of course, we're not going to allow China to install our 5G. Like, these are things that just make me crazy.
You know what it's called, Jody?
What's that?
It's called spin.
Spin. Okay, so
we are dealing with security over here. Look at that.
Let's take our spin.
We're not going to deal with security over here.
Let's take our spin all the way back to one of my very favorite topics. Not my favorite topic, because I get called an anti-cyclist, even though I count them 5 bikes and love to cycle. I, however, do not enjoy being attacked by the cyclist troll gaslighting agenda nightmare on social media. And I kind of felt good when I saw Professor Weaver step up and say, this is unbelievable. And the fact that he was attacked so resoundingly by the same boom of cyclist cyclist activists, right? Who were all like, you're just Stanley Park. And he's like, I'm not talking about Stanley Park. Calm down. Talking about Victoria, you nuts.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
It's his. I listened to his interview on Mike Smith's show.
Me too.
I wrote down a couple of things he said. You can't develop policy based on ideology. You got to bring everybody to the table with you. You got to bring everybody with you. Recognize diversity of needs. Not his classic, not my way or it's not your way or the highway. He was an ironic statement. And of course, he was very clear saying, I'm not Green Party, I'm a nonpartisan. So he's not his MPA now.
Yeah.
So I had no idea that he's
no idea. But what about also did you see Kirk LaPointe's, I'm putting you on the spot here because usually I would ask you if you had read it. Kirk LaPointe recently wrote on this topic, basically saying Vancouver needs and BC needs, in fact, somebody to mediate and moderate and be the czar of cars versus bikes. Like, literally needs somebody to manage that so that the infrastructure is clear. And I actually really enjoyed how Kirk laid it out. I recommend that people have a look at biv.ca, Business in Vancouver, and have a look at how he laid it out. Because he didn't have like all the answers, but he did say, people who, I'm pointing to myself, people who love to cycle, people who really do enjoy and benefit from some of the bike lanes are being, painted with this crazy brush because we want to make sure that people with disabilities can access Stanley Park safely in an expedited fashion. And the businesses in the park, heritage businesses, aren't gutted by a velodrome that some buddy who loves to spend their weekends riding around in circles at Stanley Park at high speeds. Come on.
Well, and then one of the other things that Weaver said, modeling needs to be done. One of the things that I thought I appreciated with the Green Party till this time, and maybe this is why Andrew Weaver is no longer the Green Party, is they usually respect evidence-based decision-making. And modeling, he talked about modeling. And of course, Stanley Park's the ultimate example. They were in the midst of modeling of what to build and what kind of scenario, what would that bike lane look like? But they instead, the commissioners, Green Party and COPE decided to slam through their own ideas without proper modeling, and therefore sided with the ideological side of the issue. And he even said, and Andrew Weaver, former leader of the Green Party, said that their argument that this was a green initiative was not accurate, that was spin, as it were.
Yeah.
And
it was a convenient talking point is what it was.
Exactly.
And at a time when it felt like they could push it through because everybody was panicking as to whether or not they or their elders or loved ones, friends and family might die in a pandemic. But, that.
But this is what is called in politics, Jody, a wedge issue.
Yes.
And John Cooper, as you see, has taken a very strong stand on this, and it's a risky one for him you can do this because you're not running for office. John's a politician, and for him to take a very strong stance, which will be spun as anti-bike, as you know, as you experienced, and as Andrew Weaver has experienced, when in fact what he's talking about, just like you are, and just like I have always talked about, good governance, policy-based, or evidence-based policy decision-making. It's not about bikes versus cars.
No.
It's about making good decisions for everyone, which is your role in your governorship responsibility. As you govern, you're not supposed to manage staff. You're not supposed to and oh, by the way, we can talk about the amount of money councillors are spending in Vancouver and talk about that if you want. But this is not your job is to govern and to listen to the people, all the people. Once you're elected, you can go on an election campaign and do whatever you want, but. So when you put yourself ideologically on one side, and this is clearly what the Green Party is doing, certainly at Park Board, that they're standing up for the bike people because they know they worked for Vision Vancouver for 10 years. It's a wedge issue in politics, and it's an effective one. And so John takes a risk in his future in politics by becoming the anti-bike guy, because in Vancouver, that's not a good thing. And you don't want to be the anti-bike guy. They try to paint me as that brush. They try to paint you as a person against bike. Now,
I'm going to keep
effective strategy.
I'm going to keep speaking up for the people that I believe should have access to Stanley Park, and that is every British Columbian, every Canadian, every tourist, everybody of all walks. And I really feel that being painted as an anti-bike person, it just shows the character of somebody who would throw that at you, at me, at John, at others, because at Tricia Barker, the bullying that Tricia has dealt with, Park Board Commissioner Tricia Barker, who is literally her day job is caring for seniors and people with disabilities. I'm caring for my dad, seeing how difficult it is just to get him to a doctor's appointment and back. Never mind taking him to some place that's going to make him joyous and feel amazing, that is going to trigger a memory for him, like stopping at 3rd Beechwood or going to the tea house and being able to roll up the ramp and sit there. But we can't. Because you know what? Cars can't cross bike lanes. And that bike lane is plunked down in places where cars can't get to, where they need to go with their disabled, passenger. Why doesn't your dad just hop on and hop off a bus? Dad's not hopping anywhere. God, I'd love for him to be able to hop. Stop talking to me. That's how I feel about this.
Jody, can't we all just get along?
Why can't we? Well, because COVIDiots exist.
Yes.
Can we get to that topic real quick before we get to my column?
Which is kind of related about, getting along.
A little bit. Yeah. So before we get there, the breaking news today is the fact that the fines for gathering, individual fines for gathering increases from $235 to $575. Only 10% of people are actually paying these fines at this moment, but the government will be coming for you, and it will hit your credit score. If not, put you in a position like points on your driver's license. You cannot renew your driver's license until you pay your fine. So be ready. I propose, and maybe this is a column for next week, but I'd like to see these be kind of like parking tickets. You pay it now, it's $575. You pay it 6 months from now, it's $2,000. You pay it 8 months from now, it's $10,000. Pay your fine. Stop it.
And you give out 50 of those, and you can build a toilet in Cooper's.
See? Brought it all the way around, back to the toilet. So in the interest of all getting along, the big ask this week, and this was actually a topic that comes truly from the heart, because and we've talked about this on primary care for my dad. I have been vaccinated, but I'm the only person in my family who has been vaccinated. My elderly parents, my stepdad and my mom, both in their 80s with underlying health issues. My significant other, who is in his 50s, a Métis man, so he will be getting it sooner than some. Because if you're unaware that First Nations people, including Métis people, have the opportunity because of higher risk to get vaccinated sooner. And there are a lot of people talking about it. Teachers in Surrey, people up at Whistler, so the processing plant that didn't follow the rules, now they're going to get the AstraZeneca. Like, this conversation is just a tick, 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 tick. It's like, everybody, shh. How about we just get as many people vaccinated as we can, as fast as possible?
It's going to happen. Everybody who wants it will get it. We are living through the hell for last year. A few more months of hell, and we'll all be fine.
Yes, there it is.
And so just kind of just chill, man.
Chill, man.
Chill
and read at the Orca. Go to Twitter at the Orca, at George _Affleck, at Jody Vance, Jody with a Y. Unless you want to yell at me for being anti-bike, then don't bother because you're already muted. But you'll find UnSpun podcast, of course, on the Fin, which is a great resource for people who want to stay up to speed on what is happening locally in the province of British Columbia when it comes to politics and so much more. So go to theorca.ca, sign up for the Fin with your email address. Nobody sells your information. And every weekday in your inbox, you will receive a list of required reading. I very much enjoy the Fin. So
saves me hours.
Doesn't it though? McLean K is pulling that off. I love it. Okay, we're out of time. We got to go. Say goodbye, George.
Bye-bye.
Bye.